Hello and welcome back to Endstep, the Upkeep after show. Last week was the Christmas episode, and it's probably a nightmare for me to edit, so press F in the chat for me.
You guys might like it, but around the table, it will forever live in infamy.
Yes, but we love doing the Christmas episodes. Last year was one of our favorite episodes of the season, and I think that even with the tech issues and even with this being a crazy long game, I know it won't look like it after I edit it, but it was like a 4-hour game. With that said, this is still like a really fun game. A lot of crazy things happened, and we tried a lot of new things. It was our first 5-player game that we tried on the channel, and obviously it was, Secret Santa, so everyone was playing decks they hadn't never seen before. So a lot of interesting factors. So with all that said, if you haven't seen the episode, make sure you go watch it. Otherwise, this video is not going to make sense, as always. But let's go ahead and just go around the table, starting with Tommy. Why did you build the deck that you build for your person?
So we had a Google Doc where we put ideas of things like ideas we'd like, things we didn't like. Jason made it fun for me. He said, do anything. I don't have anything, which is
no sense of direction.
Which is nice on one hand because it's like, well, okay, that's the most freedom I could have. But on the other hand, gives me no direction whatsoever to start from.
Let me say about that. I didn't want you to be restricted to anything. I didn't want you to see a list of stuff that I wanted and be like, well, I don't know if it'll fit into this exact thing. I'm getting a free commander deck to play with, and I was just happy about that.
Yeah, and that's understandable, and I do appreciate that. But also, it gave me, once I got into it, I'm like, cool, I can just do whatever, and it's gonna work. But starting somewhere, it made it hard because I'm like, where do I even start with no guidance? But it's it's fine. I think it worked out, and I talked with a couple of these guys of being like, hey, so what decks does Jason have, and what has he said in the past maybe that he doesn't like or that he hasn't vibed with? So I had a little bit of direction. Yeah, so kind of with that knowing of the decks you had, I was like, okay, well, this kind of fits into a slot he doesn't really have, and I think he'll enjoy playing this one, so we're going to go for it, and I think it worked out well.
I did have a really good time playing this deck, even though I did get to play it for very long in the game. What I loved about it is every turn I did something. Even on turn 1, I had that hideaway land, so
right.
I was able to look at an extra card and then potentially play it later.
Mm-hmm.
And every turn after that, I was doing stuff, and I had a good time with it.
And that's the thing, it's a fast deck and it wants to go fast, so I made sure to try and keep costs low. So that way you could be doing stuff, because it's bad when you have an aggro deck that doesn't go fast, because then it's like, cool, I can't do anything.
Right.
I'm already behind because I'm playing an aggro deck. So yeah. But.
And then Steven, you had Tommy. How did you decide what to build for him?
That was like number 1 on his list, honestly. He was just like, I want an Arcades deck, and I was like, okay, we're going to make him an Arcades deck.
I put one specific commander, Arcades,
right.
And then I put other 2 like archetypes or themes.
Yeah, we just had like a Google Doc where we shared with each other that were like, if you have a specific commander you might like, or if there's an archetype you'd like to try, yeah.
Because I didn't want to limit you too much, limit whoever on too much, being like one of these 3 commanders and that's it. But I knew Arcades, like I said, I wanted to build around, so I put him on there. But then the other I kept more open, so you could have some freedom there. But.
Yeah, so that was the main reason, because it was like your number 1, and it was specific, and I was like, well, 3-color deck's always fun, and Arcades just seems really interesting, and just with all the defenders and everything. The deck, I liked building the deck and trying to figure out what all cards I wanted to put in there, and I even got excited. I was like, I kind of want to play this deck. And makes me even happier that this was the deck that won, so I feel pretty good about that. I like it. It's a cool deck.
It's very cool.
I used to have an Arcades deck, and it definitely has got me reminiscent. Yeah, it was a good time.
Morgan was the one who showed me Arcades as a commander, and I'm like, oh, that's rad. I want that. So I've been wanting to build him myself, but I was like, we'll see. If someone wants to build him for me, that also works.
So every Arcades deck I've ever played against has given me problems. So.
Yeah. The reason I took mine apart was because it would, like, people would be like, yeah, he's got to go, and I would always just get ganged up.
You become public enemy number 1.
So Jason, you had Preston, and we had a rough budget of $50 for the decks, and you went double that, but you did mostly just pull cards from your own personal collection, so it's not like you specifically spent double the budget. But walk us through that process, and then how you came to this as the specific deck you were going to build for Preston.
Well, I didn't look at the Google Doc at all. I kind of wanted to just do something that Preston hadn't really done before. Most of the time he plays life gain and he just builds his life total as much as possible. And
Doesn't do anything
I've
else.
never really known him to be the type of dude that enjoys using life as a resource in Magic. He really wants to just hoard as much life as possible to keep himself safe. And so I wanted to build him a deck where he had to utilize his life as a resource. And so I was looking for that, and I found the commander, Varak, I don't know exactly how you're supposed to say it, but
All words are made up.
it's true. I was like, this is perfect. This is like a perfect commander for the type of deck that I want to build Preston. And I looked at a bunch of cards online that synergize with it well or just were going to be good options in the deck. And I was like, let me just go through my collection and see what I have. And I pulled out a fair amount of cards that worked well in the deck. Only needed about 14 more cards. And I only spent $17 on those cards. You know, since I looked at the price of it and I was like, okay, it's over budget by quite a bit, but is it $50 stronger?
Well, I mean, the game could have ended 2 hours earlier had it not been as good as it was.
I don't know about all that. I could have lived longer than I did had Morgan decided not to kill me out of nowhere for no reason.
Well, and
but
I could have also killed Preston far earlier if I had played it correctly, so...
This white-black deck has one board wipe in it. I think that balances some things out.
I agree. I felt that balanced everything out. That was one of the things about it that balanced everything out. The land base wasn't super crazy. I had one like somewhat expensive land in there that you actually played the whole game. I did throw a fetch land in there that I had. I gifted you a fetch land, by the way. But that's just because the fetch land synergized really well with the commander.
And then Preston, what about you? You had me. What led you to do this?
So your three options on the deck were Urion or Uriok?
I don't remember. I think Yurok is his name.
Yurok,
He's
something like
the
that.
Jund one that brings mana burn back.
So you specifically said he would be an option. I was like, I kind of want to go looking because I like looking for cards, so I didn't go with him. But your other two things you said you would like is a control deck and a deck with an old commander no one really knows. So when I was looking through all the old commanders, like oldest to newest, Kamigawa seemed to be the set where like the legendary creatures were cheap enough to build around while also having some decent power to them. So that's why I went with him, and it mono blue so good for control with all that card draw that you started doing at the end, going through 30 cards a turn.
It's beautiful.
Like Baral's in there.
Yep.
Which would probably be a stronger commander overall for the deck, but I think most people know Baral, so
Yeah.
I didn't really
Well, and
go with that.
yeah, and I mean, tomorrow is like such an interesting, cool. I mean, it's probably not actually a good commander because it's six mana. It doesn't attack well, and it doesn't. There are cards that specifically are like non-bows with it, right? Because you want to play all these cards that draw cards, but now you can't play the cards that say when you draw a card, do this, right? So it is probably not as good as Baral, but Baral is like telegraphs counter spell tribal. And that's not fun. So I actually think it's pretty cool. I didn't even know this card existed, so I was
I was a
pretty
little
content
worried,
with
but
that.
I was hoping.
Yeah. Steven,
Hi.
I had you, and I wanted to build you a 3-color deck because
I wanted a 3-color deck.
yeah, because I know that you like 3-color decks, but you only have the one, right? So I wanted to give you another one. I didn't want to give you green because all your decks are green. But I wanted to give you something that was like a nice blend of easy to pick up because it was something that made sense to you, but then also push you a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And this was great for that because it's kind of tribal, right? It's kind of night tribal, and you love tribal. Like half your decks are
Tribal's cool.
tribal decks.
That's not true, but alright. I have two tribal decks.
Oh, okay. Well, it feels like a lot, but
Well, now 3.
but it's also equipment, and you have a artifact deck, but you've never played equipment, you've never played Voltron, and not that this is necessarily a Voltron deck, but
It's
you know,
Voltron S.
yeah. So that was kind of my reasoning there. You playing the deck, maybe you don't know the answer, but what do you think maybe a couple of the best cards in the deck are? And maybe that's a question more for the person who built the deck, but. So for the Arcades deck, if you don't think you know the answer, Tommy, Steven, what do you think the one or two best cards in the deck are?
I mean, for me, just from what I saw, and we saw most of the deck. My library is very thin by the end of the game.
did.
I mean, the thing that really came in clutch for me at the end was the thing that Steven didn't even know he put in the deck, was the infinite mana combo of
That's
Axebane Guardian and High Alert.
One thing I
just,
want
just being able to create infinite mana just lets me dump out so many creatures,
One thing I
which
wanna
is what
say
this
about
deck wants to
that-
do. So like,
It's not really a 2-card infinite mana combo because he has to have defenders on the. He has to have at least 5 defenders
He has
on
to
the
have at
total
least five.
at
defenders.
least 5, yeah.
So it's really a 6-card
Seven
combo.
card combo.
But
Total.
with Arcades in a defender deck, it's not that hard to attain.
you would never put this as a combo in like any other deck.
No.
It only works in Arcades, but I kind of love it more for that. That it's like so specific, and Steven still didn't even realize he put it in there.
Well,
He was
yeah,
looking
I
for
just
something,
I didn't
but-
think about it.
I kind of
Yeah.
want to go back, watch the game, and see just how
How?
long both those cards sat on the battlefield, and none of us,
It was a while. I mean,
none of us noticed.
I didn't play the High Alert till pretty late.
Yeah,
but it was a couple
yeah,
turns at
High
least.
Alert.
I probably had both
Yeah,
of these.
it was
on
it
there,
was
so.
towards the end of the game. Steven, for your deck, I think the best card in the deck
Well,
is
I didn't say my thing about this deck.
well.
So
I- okay, go ahead.
one of them was Towering Titan, which you did play.
Yes.
That card is a really great like finisher.
Mhm.
And then the blue thing that said like everything with toughness or power 1 or less is unblockable. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever
I
it's
played
called,
that
I
at the
couldn't
end of the
remember.
game.
Those 2 cards specifically are like really good like
Mhm.
finishers.
And then Steven, I actually this is a really boring answer, but I actually think that the best card in your deck is the Commander.
I like the Commander a lot.
Because it's going to draw you cards
Yeah.
and it lets you move the equipment around
For
so
free.
yeah, so much more
It's so
efficiently.
nice, yeah.
I know that's a boring answer for a commander deck, but
No, I like
the best
it.
card in the
no,
deck is
it's
the
a
commander.
good. Yeah, it's a really good card.
So for Othari, what do you think is maybe the best card, or if you don't know, Tommy can tell you.
So while I don't know exactly what the best cards in the deck are, 2 cards that I wanted to play while I was still in the game that are both actually really good. The first one is Commander Lyara Porter. This is the card I actually exiled with the Hideaway ability at the beginning of the game. This is what I could have cast for free. Whenever you attack, spells you cast from exile this turn cost X less to cast, where X is the number of players being attacked. Exile the top X cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those exiled cards. So that seemed like a really fun thing to do. But this was the card that I had in my hand that if I had this for a couple turns, 2 turns minimum, somebody dies for sure. And it's Aki Battle Squad. Whenever 1 or more modified creatures you control attack, untap all modified creatures you control. After this combat, there is an additional combat phase. This ability triggers only once each turn. So yeah, if I had that out and had that around for a couple of turns, at least 1 person at the table dies. So these were both really, really strong cards that I saw that I didn't get to play. I don't know if there's any. I don't know what other stronger cards you would suggest.
No, those were pretty much. Those were 2 of the big ones that I was excited to see. So I'm glad we got to see at least one of them. But the only other one that we also saw was Symmetry Matrix. Is just a bonkers card.
Symmetry.
So and with how many tokens you want to make with that deck that generally tend to have the same equal power and toughness, and with how many counters you want to put that usually give +1/+1, it's a really good card to.
I
for that
drew
deck,
like 3
so.
or 4 cards just off that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
It's kind of
that's probably the only one.
I think that card's really underrated.
Yeah,
Most
it's
creatures
really good.
in the game have equal power and toughness.
It's very, very, very common to see equal power and toughness. So, yeah, that's probably the only other card I'd mention for that.
With you
So-
mentioning the card that gives your stuff extra combat phases, that was one of the cards that, assuming Tommy didn't kill me, I could have put X Plate Wall Breaker and attached it to my commander. It says for Mirrodin isn't really relevant, but it has equip creature gets +2/+2, and whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of your turn, untap each attacking creature after this phase. There's an additional combat phase. So I would have played that, attached it to my commander, and with the 2 creatures I had, I would have hit Preston with my commander twice, killing him, and then Morgan with the other creature I had twice, which would have killed him as well. And then I also had Mask of Grizzlebrand, which I'm mainly just showing off that it was in my hand when I had it, and I could have played it on that turn too, which would have given my commander lifelink, so I would have gained. How much was he hitting for? Like 10 or something.
A lot.
So I would have gained like 20 live.
Yeah, so it's probably good that you went when you did. And then Preston, in your deck, what were maybe a couple of the cards that you thought might have been the best?
I think probably the 2 best, in my opinion, are Vona, Butcher of Magan, and Astron the Decadent. They're both 4/4s, which is a pretty good stat line during combat. They both have lifelink. Vona has Vigilance. Astron has Death Touch, which are also very good during combat. Vona is the one that lets me tap it, pay 7 life to destroy any permanent. With my commander, I can pay 14 to blow 2 things up every single turn with all my lifelink, so I can gain that life back. Asterion is doubling either my life gain or opponent's life loss, both of which are fantastic ways to finish the game or stay alive.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that those two. This one is definitely one that I would say is one of the top 3 best cards in the deck. One of the cards that I think is probably the second best card in the deck is Underworld Connections. The enchantment that enchants the land, and you can pay 1 life and tap it to draw cards, pay 2 life, get 2 cards. It's a good return on cards for life, and in this deck, you're going to gain 2 life back pretty quickly. I mean, he had that artifact at the end of the game that was gaining him 2 life at the end of each of his turns. So even just something simple like that, where you can get a ton of value from it just by having your commander in play.
Yeah. And the commander actually is good enough that the life swap deck that I played on episode 19, I think, I changed it to be black-white, and that the commander of that deck is good enough that I'm going to need to be like, well, is there enough benefit for me to add it in there? So I'll have to figure that out. But from what I noticed in my deck, maybe a couple of the best cards are Octavia, the Living Thesis, and Nezahal, Primal Tide. And the main reason I say that is mostly just because they're big, beefy creatures that can end the game. And, you know, this deck's cool, but it kind of dirtles. And I was like, well, how the heck do you win the game? Well, these are 2 big creatures that also give you just so much advantage if they go unchecked. So I thought that they might be some of the best. Am I missing anything?
I was going to say those 2 plus a third is Scourge of the Fleets.
Yes.
Cost 7, 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, you bounce all of your opponent's creatures with toughness less than the number of islands you control. And there's 25 basic islands in that deck, and I think 1 or 2 islands that are non-basic. So yeah, that's a pretty good way to clear out the board and go and finish it.
I did have that in my hand for most of the game, actually. I kept holding on to it, though, because I was like, they're picking on Preston, they're picking on each other, I'm good, I'm safe. But then I got to the point where I was like, oh, I have 1 life. Well, too late. So
yeah, Morgan's sitting over there like, yeah, they're picking on Preston, he's picking on Steven, I picked on Jason. We're good, we're fine.
What do you think are some things that people need to keep in mind for upgrades, right? Because I know Jason kind of went over budget, but like in general, we had our budget. So what are things that people need to keep in mind when they're upgrading these decks? Tommy, why don't you start us off? What do you think that if Jason cares to upgrade his deck, what would be good in the deck that you didn't fit into the budget?
I mean, this probably goes for all of us, but lands obviously it's very, very difficult to make a legitimately good land base for cheap. There's a lot of basics in there, which I think, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think basics are good especially when you're on a budget. I'd rather put in more basics than a bunch of stuff that comes in tapped or stuff that bounces. I mean, those are good and they have their uses, but in a 2-color deck that wants to go fast, I think basics are a good option to put in. So I put in a lot of basics. So that's probably your biggest thing, is just the mana base and the land base. But other than that, maybe probably alternate ways to win, because that just wants to do a lot of damage.
It's just a big beater,
right? And so that's good, and it can work, but that can also be shut down very quickly if people
board wipes.
Right, if people have the right options, board wipes are being thrown around, it can be shut down very quickly. So that's probably your biggest.
So maybe just add in cards that give the deck a little bit more versatility as far as winning.
Probably, yeah.
Steven, what about Tommy's deck? What should he keep in mind for
the
upgrades?
main things I could think of? Protection. You want to protect Arcades.
Mm-hmm.
I did not put in Heroic Intervention or Swiftfoot Boots or Lightning Greaves.
Teferi's Protection.
Teferi's Protection. Another one that'd be good in that color, Cyclonic Rift. I mean, obviously, these are going to be way over the budget, which are all those cards would be great in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't that many creatures that I could really think of, at least when I was going through, that I'd be like, oh, that's too over budget or anything. Because I think the most expensive creature in that deck is Arcades.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, it's only a $3 card.
Because the defender keyword is what's there to balance a lot of these creatures out, so they can't attack that, and a lot of them they just give 0 power.
Right.
So when you unshackle them from that and give them, and basically, you assign combat with their toughness, that makes them a lot better, but that only really works in a deck like Arcades or in very specific circumstances. So yeah, we mentioned it in the game, but it's like, as far as the creatures are concerned, there's very little difference between a $50 Arcades deck and a $5,000 Arcades deck. Like,
right.
In regards of the creatures,
It's mostly lands and then the expensive
yeah,
staples.
and lands, obviously.
stuff that we've already met, Teferi's Protection,
Yeah.
Hero, stuff like that.
Jason, what about for Preston? Is there anything you know of that he should keep an eye out for upgrades?
Well, I think he has too many board wipes in the deck. I think that
The one is too
he
many.
needs
many
to
board
lower
wipes.
the... No. There's a lot of targeted removal. Maybe just take some of the targeted removal out, put some mass removal in. I think the land base is fine if you wanted to change things up. There are some mana rocks in there if you wanted to take some of those out that you didn't think you needed and add lands in, or take certain creatures out, add more lands in. That's fine. But I think it works pretty well, and I put as many of the cards that have pay life to activate their ability. I put as many of those in there that would be good for the deck as I could find. So I don't know if you wanted to play around with the creature base or anything like that. There's about 23 or 24 creatures in there, I think. But yeah, I just make more, put in some more mass removal, and then just the commander staples that you would put in an Orzhov deck. Like, I didn't have a Teferi's Protection in that deck either. It's not going crazy over budget like that.
Preston, for my deck, I'm not really interested in having Baral as the commander. I'd like to keep Tomorrow as a janky idea.
I don't even know if you'd call it janky.
It's pretty jank. I mean,
So for a 1-5 is kind of
That's kind of jank.
I mean, you did kill me.
Is there anything I should keep in mind if upgrading's where I want to go with this?
Obviously, you can get way more expensive card draw effects.
For success would be insane.
God, yeah.
Some of the more expensive counter spells, because there are definitely some meta ones in there in that price range. There's currently only 16 creatures in there, just because of what the deck is trying to do. So you could definitely up that a little bit, especially with an increase in budget. Honestly, that I feel like that deck is doing a lot of what it wants to do already. You can just find slightly more expensive, more powerful versions for a couple of the cards.
I think what's going to be hard is that I'm going to probably want to add more ramp into it, because the commander's 6 mana, and the commander is so cool and so fun that I want to do it. So I probably need to add more ramp, but I also need to find ways to actually end the game.
Yeah,
because it's definitely a dirtily deck. And then Steven, for you, for your deck, the land base is the obvious choice, right? It's a 3-color deck that doesn't have green, so you don't have like the Cultivates and Kodama's Reaches and whatnot to fix your mana that way.
Right.
So you definitely could have better dual lands, because I do have a decent amount of dual lands in there, but a lot of them enter the battlefield tapped or whatever because of budget reasons.
Right.
So that's the main thing. But you'd also be surprised how many actual Knight and equipment cards are expensive. Like, there's a Knight from, I believe it's Kamigawa, and I'm pretty sure it says Knight you control have double strike or something. It's like a $20 card because it's never been reprinted.
Wow.
So, there's that. That's a cool card, but it's $20. And then there's also just
goes so expensive
Yeah.
so quickly.
Oh, God, yeah.
because equipments are colorless, so they can just go in most decks. So the really good ones, like the sort of X and Y cycle, like most of those equipments are really expensive. Like the cheap ones are like $8 and the expensive ones are like 30 something bucks. I feel like I found a decent range for budget equipments, but even then, you could go just a couple dollars over budget and start getting better equipments. It's just that equipments get really expensive, so you have to kind of balance is this worth the money or not? So
Yeah.
So what does anyone have a favorite moment from the game?
Oh, man.
Creating infinite mana is pretty great.
I mean, that was
Yeah,
fun.
that was pretty cool.
Legit for me, it had to be the moment that I realized that Tommy had infinite mana.
Yeah.
It was just a casual little thing. I'm sitting here in my chair. I see that at the bottom of his card, there's some little mana pips. I'm like, oh, that has another ability. What does it do? And then I put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I was like, how did none of us figure this out?
How did I not figure it out? I built the deck.
Yeah.
Legitimately, after that, it was when I died. Because
Yeah, that was a great moment.
because not one turn prior to that. Not one turn prior to that, we were deciding what was the biggest thing that we wanted to get rid of on the battlefield, and we decided on Tommy's creature that was going to make more flyers for him.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. Meanwhile, Morgan over here, he had a creature.
He had a loaded gun pointed at your head.
It literally had the words, that player loses the game on it. And we were all like,
He doesn't have that ready.
There's no way he'll be able to do that.
From the moment that hit the battlefield, we were all ripping on that. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, what is that? That's so specific.
And then it literally killed the first player in the game. That whole moment was just like,
Yeah, so that
such a turnaround. It was great.
Besides the fact that sounds impossible, and it's just hilarious that I did it, because also I was thinking about that turn, just activating it to draw 2 cards and then discard a card, because I wanted my lands. I was missing land drops a lot of the time that game. So I was thinking about doing that, but I kind of looked at my hand again, like, well, is there anything better I can do? And I was like, oh. And part of what's funny about it too is I'm like my full-time job now is I edit for MTG Goldfish, and there's an episode recently of their podcast where they were talking about like you lose the game cards and stuff in Magic, and they talked about Adamus, and they're like, this is the worst card we're talking about. Like, they're like, I'm sure in the entire history of Magic the Gathering, no one has ever killed someone with that.
Now, not only did someone get killed to it, it's on camera.
We have video evidence.
Yeah.
Video footage.
I've won and lost to that card on Arena quite a few times over the years when I was playing it a lot, but I've never obviously had it happen on camera or anything.
It's kind of freaking awesome. I actually, you know what? Maybe that's what I do. Maybe I just make this the new commander.
I like to think of it as the Exodia of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
It kinda
Look at the
is.
deck list.
1,
there
2,
is
3,
such a
4,
wide
5, 6 are
range
dead.
of cost that is an option.
I really like the Tommy ones. It's cool.
I love how happy all of us are for Tommy winning games.
Yeah.
Not a single game first season.
What a redemption tour for Tommy.
Honestly.
We got to the recap episode last season of our stats, and we see that big old goose egg next to my name, and I took that personally.
Yeah, and he won one game in between the seasons, and
Yep.
then he's won. I mean, you haven't played as many games this season,
No, but
so
I've
far,
won
but you've won half of them. I
3 or
think.
4, yeah.
Yeah. So a 50% win percentage is better than all of us. So
Yeah.
I think we can probably agree that this is probably the only time we'll ever do a 5-player game.
You don't want to do 5 players in there?
I'd rather shoot myself.
Maybe next year for Christmas we can do this again, but that's probably be about it. Maybe
Yeah.
once a year.
Yeah, I could see that. So I guess, seriously, let us know in the comments what you guys think about the 5-player games. I know that's not the traditional way to play Magic or whatever. That's obviously not what we do often. But, you know, sometimes that's what our play group looks like. This is our main 5 people in our group. So we do sometimes have times where it just is 5-player game. So it's representative of our play styles. But it was like a 4-hour game. It's going to be a nightmare to edit. I don't know how it's going to turn out. So do you guys have any other thoughts or concerns? Like, are you like, well, what if we did this? You know, like any other comments about that?
I think that the 5-player game was fun, but I agreed that it was just too long for us to do regularly. I think that this is something that we could do once a year for a Christmas episode. It's strange to me that for back-to-back years on Christmas, when we filmed the Christmas episode, we've had technical issues
Yeah.
where
Crazy.
the camera stops recording. I don't understand how that's happened 2 years in a row. And maybe we do this again next year, we won't have those issues, and maybe it's not as stressful. Also, I did not that I dislike this by any means, but I did like last year when it was like the White Elephant gift exchange, and we kind of did that at the table, and none of us really knew who was going to get what or what any of us were even going to get. I thought that was cool.
Well, so maybe we should do that. Like, we each build our own deck and then throw it in the middle, and then whoever, you know.
I could see that.
Just as long as you
so
don't get
that-
your own deck.
So
Well,
unless
maybe that's
anyone
fine.
had anything else to add about 5-player games, that it was my last question for the day, which was, what do you guys think about for Christmas 2024? We're going to keep doing Christmas episodes. The first
fun.
Christmas episode was one of our favorite episodes last season. It's
That was a
probably
good
going to
one.
be one of our favorite episodes this season. It's a fun experience. It's a good time to get us all together, and any video where it involves all of the group, I enjoy that. So do you guys have any, because I also want to do something different, right? We did White Elephant last year. We're doing Secret Santa this year. I would like to do new things, and I have a couple things that I'd like to mention as ideas, but I want to see what you guys think first.
I like the idea of, like, it's White Elephant, but it's with all of us, and we all build a deck. We put it in the middle.
So we're not.
I'm gonna grab this one.
Yeah, we're not building for a specific person.
Yeah.
We're just
we're just building just a
a deck
Obviously,
with
I
a
think we should
budget
stay
or,
within
you
the
know.
budget.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a cool idea.
Just what I said a second ago. Just the same thing there.
So the two ideas I had is, last year we did the White Elephant and Preston made all the decks. We could theoretically cycle through every year we have one person do that, but then that's the one gripe that I had about last year's Christmas episode was that Preston didn't actually get to play the game. I think he enjoyed it. I think he had fun, right? He got to make all these unique decks and he got to watch it unfold in chaos, so I think there's joy to be had there. But I don't know if that would be my first pick, but that theoretically is what we could do again. We could do White Elephant again and just have cycle through who's building the decks. The other idea I had is we do either White Elephant or Secret Santa or something like that, but we do it as if that person was bad for Christmas and they're getting coal in their stocking.
Oh,
and then you intentionally build something.
That's just super jank
so if we
and,
do,
weird. Oh,
so if we do,
that.
if it's White Elephant, you just generically build something that's weird, so that whoever ends up with it is like, what the heck?
Yeah.
But then if it's Secret Santa, you specifically are like, oh, Steven, he likes green.
Steven gets Bria.
And it's just like Bria. Yeah. Just build something that they're like, there's no way in heck that this person would like this. So like it's Christmas, but they've been bad. That was the fun idea I had. But
yeah, that could be fun.
we have time to think about it, right? And the viewers will let us know.
365 days or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And the viewers will let us know in the comments if they have any ideas as well. So any closing thoughts on Christmas 2023?
I think it was just a lot of fun. It was super fun.
This was a very interesting game.
Even with a 5-player game, I know it's going to be a nightmare for you to edit, Morgan. And
Yeah, I'll pray for you.
Godspeed, soldier. You're doing God's work, son.
I will
But it was
say,
super fun.
beginning of the season, we all kind of talked about what game we were most excited to play, and I think a couple of us said this one.
Mm-hmm.
It has lived up to the hype for me. This is my
I've been looking
favorite
forward
game.
to this for weeks.
Yeah.
This is my favorite game we've played this season by far. This was so much, and I died first, like immediately. Still, my favorite
died
game
like-
this season by far. It was
Like
just so
45 minutes into a 4-hour game.
just so much fun, honestly.
Well, thanks for watching this episode of Endstep. We normally, do the every other week for the gameplay. We do have a slightly longer break because of the Christmas season. Go spend time with your families and whatnot and all that good stuff. And we'll be back. I believe it's January 5th is when the next one's coming out. And in that episode, we are playing Pauper Commander, PEDH, if you will. It should be pretty fun. And we'll have going back to the normal schedule of episode every other week after that. Okay, make sure you subscribe. Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.